Ladies and gentlemen, good morning everyone, and welcome back to Shade Med, the Shared Awareness and Deconfliction in the Mediterranean Conference. I am Commander Darragh Irwin of the Irish Defence Forces, and I am currently based in the EU operational headquarters in Rome since May. Operation EUNAVFOR Med Irini is co-hosting this conference with NATO Allied Maritime Command. This second day is focused on the working group sessions that you have just finished, as well as on NATO's approach to maritime security. We also have some very interesting keynote speakers to look forward to. As stated yesterday, Shade Med aims to share knowledge and interest paramount to contributing to peace and stability in the wider Mediterranean. This also means that we are looking forward to active participation during the questions and answers of the last panel. Yesterday, we had three extremely interesting panels. Mr. Charles Fries, Deputy Secretary General for Common Security and Defence Policy and Crisis Response of the European External Action Service, held a keynote speech that underlined Irini's achievements and that the EU will continue contributing to the delicate peace in Libya. Mr. Fries also expressed his appreciation that Shade Med 2021 is organised together by Irini and NATO Maritime Command, and his hope that this cooperation can be extended operationally. This morning, working groups resumed at 0900 hours to finalise their discussions in their second session. Their outcomes and policy recommendations will be presented today in plenary session at 14:15 hours this afternoon. For all speakers, please be reminded to make sure your microphone is turned on before you commence speaking and turned off when finished. To kick off this second day, that is more of a NATO focus, we will listen to Vice Admiral Didier Piéton. Vice Admiral Piéton is the Deputy Commander of Allied Maritime Command of NATO Marcom. This will be followed by an address by General Claudio Graziano, Chairman of the EU Military Committee. After this, Mr. John Manza, Assistant Secretary General for Operations of NATO, will deliver a speech. I wish you a great start to the second day and hand over the floor to Vice Admiral Piéton, Deputy Commander of NATO Allied Maritime Command. Please, Admiral Piéton, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Commander. I would like first to, ladies and gentlemen, to say how I'm glad to kick off this second day of Shade Med. First, let me also Admiral Stefano Turchetto, congratulate you for your recent appointment as Iranian Operation Commander. And Shade Med is probably one, but not the only one of your first challenge to face. So thank you for this. On behalf of Vice Admiral Keith Blount, Marcom Commander, it's my pleasure then to open this second day of a Shade Med Forum and welcome everyone. We are very pleased to co-host this event once again with EU Naval Forces Mediterranean. I personally would have enjoyed being with you and some of you in this beautiful city of Roma, but I think it was wisely decided to do this through VTC, and it probably allows and ensure the most comprehensive audience in the present context. I would like also to thank the staffs from Marcom and EUNAVFOR Med that worked very smoothly together in order to ensure our meetings goes well and allow this exchange of views. I am also, as you mentioned, Commander, very grateful to General Claudio Graziano, the chair of the EU Union and Military Committee, to address through a video message to follow, but also to Mr. John Manza, the NATO's Assistant Secretary General for Operation, who is about, or maybe has already joined us to provide his remarks. So I will tell you about two shared stories. A shared story between Markham and ShadeMade. Let me remind the theme of this forum: sharing security, culture, and values for a shared prosperity in the Med. And I think Markham dedication to ShadeMade is very much about this idea of sharing. We have been involved with ShadeMade since its inception. Markham co-hosted the 2016 meeting along with NATO Joint Forces Command at Naples, provided keynote remarks at the 2017 meeting, and hosted again in 2018 meeting. So what do we share? First, I think we share a common interest in maritime security. ShadeMade being about maritime security in its broadest sense. The Med, as already mentioned by previous speakers, is the southern flank of NATO. We meet there both partners, but also some competitors. And I think our two headquarters address the entire spectrum of maritime security challenges in this area. We have operations here in effort, of course, in countering arms trafficking and migrant trafficking in the central Mediterranean, and we have also the Markham's Operation Sea Guardian, which advances maritime security in the entire Mediterranean. I would like also to mention, for those who may not be aware of this, some elements of Markham standing naval forces in the Med, which assist the Greek and Turkish Coast Guard in monitoring illegal migrant trafficking in the agency. We've both learned that the challenges to maritime security come from a complex mosaic of actors and threats, conventional and unconventional threats. States, insurgent groups, and warring parties, pirate terror groups, transnational organized crimes, human traffickers, smugglers, polluters, etc. It's not a very nice idea of the Mediterranean, as mentioned by the previous speakers. We love the Mediterranean, so we want just to address the security issues. And this is just my point, mentioning all those potential threats. Our missions are specific because they derive from specific political mandates, but they are very much consistent to this, to the maritime security, again, in its broadest sense. Second, what are we sharing? I think we are also sharing a common approach to maritime security with both organizations, different organizations. NATO has three core tasks as set out in the 2011 strategic concept, which, as you may know, will be updated in the following months. It's first about ensuring credible deterrence against aggression and effective defense, of course, should deterrence fail, to support crisis management, and also to foster cooperative security with non-allied partner nations. And the Allied Maritime Command, or Markham, is very much and actively engaged in those tasks. To fulfill those, we, Markham, are NATO's permanent theater-wide maritime command and also the principal maritime advisors to NATO's Supreme Allied Commander for Europe. We direct all maritime forces that nations have placed under NATO command, including submarines and maritime patrol aircraft. Our command reach extends across what we call the NATO area of responsibility as set out in the Washington Treaty, from the Arctic to the Baltic Sea, and in the Med to the Mediterranean and Black Seas, of course. We are placed at the operational level. We coordinate horizontally with the other headquarters of the Allied Command for Operation chain of command, and particularly with what we call the Domain Command, air, space, cyber, etc. To advance collective security, much of the activity of our Operation Sea Guardian is focused on what we call maritime situational awareness. We have a constant network of allied ships and aircraft, submarines, that are conducting national business. They are also our eyes and ears to better understand patterns of merchant activity at sea and to discover activity that threaten our security. Several times a year, Maritime deploys a dedicated task force and task group under our command to explore areas of the Mediterranean of particular interest. Third, we are sharing our partners. We also promote maritime security in the Mediterranean through engagement with partner nations, most of the non-NATO partner nations, I should say, in the Mediterranean. We use port visits to deepen our partnership and to help improve their capacity to conduct maritime security operations. And I must say, we also learn very much from them, from their culture, from their views about the security issues. But most and foremost, probably, we are sharing challenges. The challenges I have very quickly described were discussed in our Road to ShedMed webinar, New Directions in Maritime Security. Also a feature in our present today working group 2 of the same name, which Malcolm has been showing today. The big trends are twofold, I think. First, the erosion of international order and the weakening of its security architecture. I think they are confirmed day by day, and they are also very much present in the Mediterranean region. And I will mention also the use of hybrid strategies in a context where some competitors use a grace area to come to their end state, and non-state competitors are combining military, non-military, but always ambiguous courses of action to remain below what we call the threshold of potential retaliation or open conflict. Beyond the Mediterranean, one example is provided by the recent maritime attack against merchant vessels this last summer in the Gulf of Oman, similar to those in the Red Sea that we witnessed previously. These challenges have been with us for some time. They are, I think, widely recognized. However, we also have a new and emerging set of concerns at sea that NATO is taking very seriously. They include the impact of climate change on regional security and probably also on our navies. The temperature of the Mediterranean region in particular is rising much faster than the global average, and this will have serious consequences on the geopolitics and for our navy, as I said, and it will be probably presented later on today by I think, the working groups. They also include the abuse of cyberspace to threaten the freedom of navigation and undermine maritime commerce. Today, we witnessed almost routine examples of GPS or AIS location system being jammed or being manipulating to place the ship elsewhere from where it actually is. It's very easy to do, I should say. It's very weird, I would say, because those systems have been developed to enhance maritime security. Then we have another shared story between Markham and UNAFORMAID. As I said, different and complementary in various manners. Markham is a theater-wide maritime companion commander. In peacetime, we are assuming direct command and control of the two standing naval forces in the Med and also Operation Sea Guardian, as you know. And also we anticipate a potential wartime situation. For this, Markham is maintaining capacity to command combat-ready tactical maritime headquarters and task forces, and we guarantee the NATO nations a robust maritime C2 structure able to transition seamlessly from peace to conflict if needed, of course. Following the approval of the NATO military strategy last year, Markham is implementing a new deterrence and defense concept to tackle those threats and challenges, and it has already, I must say, incredibly increased our global efficiency. As a conclusion, ShadeMade is a process and also a community of interest for not only for the 22 member nations of both EU and NATO, but also for all the stakeholders that are gathered in that forum. We are very grateful to our 3 excellent working groups for exploring key issues and looking at recommendations for how we will collectively improve security in the Med. And Malcolm will take those recommendations very seriously. We will make sure these results can be built on in our future ShadeMade forum. Allow me to close by stating our pleasure once again hosting ShadeMade, and thank again to you, Stefano Ducchetto, for your predecessors' effort in bringing it about. I wish everyone a very enjoyable and useful second day of the forum. Thank you very much.
We thank Vice Admiral Piaton for this keynote speech. And next up is a video message by General Graziano, Chairman of the EU Military Committee.
Good morning. My personal greetings to Admiral Burke, Vice Admiral Blount, and the Rear Admiral Turchetto. First of all, many thanks to UNAFOR and NATO Allied Maritime Command for organizing this year's edition of ShadeMade, again on a timely and topical subject. When earlier this year the European Commission released a joint communication on the renewed partnership with the southern neighbors, as Europeans we added a further milestone on a journey that dates long time back. Even before formal declarations, like in Barcelona 25 years ago, where we acknowledge how, I quote, a strengthened Mediterranean partnership is and will remain a strategic imperative for the European Union. The nation of Europe has been more than intertwined with the one of the larger region. I dare to say that the fate of Mare Nostrum and its surrounding areas have been at the very core of our destiny since the beginning of time, in spite of different social, religious, political, and economic future development for each one of our nations. Now more than ever, with all the challenges and the opportunities that the region continues to present, especially 10 years after the Arab Spring, expected to be peace, but instead igniting further instability, and in the wake of the recent pandemic. I'm sure you have heard it many times during this seminar. The Mediterranean region continues to be the crossroad of major crises in the Caucasus, in Sahel, or in the Middle East, affecting almost 1 billion people and a large share of the world economies. While it is true that the southeast part of the world is particular with the assertiveness by China is fostering growing concern, it will be a huge mistake to divert our engagement or simply lower our guard on our closest neighborhood. I mentioned challenges, but of course also opportunities, because there are a number of actions we can definitely undertake together for the advancement and the prosperity of the region. Human development, good governance, rule of law, addressing migration and mobility. Even the green transition with climate resilience, energy and environment issues are challenges to be tackled immediately. But if I had to underline one common requirement for all those actions to be successful, I would clearly mention peace and security. There cannot be growth without peace and security. No initiative can be studied, implemented, and bear fruits without peace and security. Therefore, preventing conflicts, promoting security cooperation, mitigating the consequences of conflicts and emergency, addressing their root causes must be on the top of our agendas. We need an unprecedented level of cooperation among all stakeholders, because we have learned it from history. Terrorism, hybrid threats, cybercrimes, illegal smuggling of people, weapons, drugs are challenges that we can face only together, building upon our common culture, values, mutual trust, commitment, and ambitions. Info sharing, defense cooperation, joint training are just examples of the many areas where we should and must do more. And this will bring the additional critical effect of countering the presence of malicious actors, who are showing every day more assertiveness, bringing de facto more instability, exacerbating the causes and the effect of existing crises. Therefore, opportunities of networking like ShedMate present every year are essential to seize the momentum and move forward. And the role that the European Union can play today and prepare to play tomorrow is further increasing. Its diverse toolbox and willingness to act are critical elements which must be understood and implemented. It is no more an option, but a must. If Europe wants to stay relevant in the global security panorama, it must undertake all responsibility for the sake of its own safety, particularly where other organizations, for different reasons, are not willing to engage anymore. The new impetus towards strategic autonomous Europe of defense as urgently called by the top European Union leadership, is what history is calling European too. Later will be too late. And let me stress that a stronger Europe will represent even a stronger partner in the Mediterranean region, providing more credible and reliable tools to accompany its partner in a shared path toward peace, security, and prosperity. Many thanks for your attention, and what more, my praise to UNAFOR and Joint Force Command Naples for organizing this paramount event.
We thank General Graziano for this interesting message to ShadeMed participants. Let me introduce another very special guest, and we will now listen to a speech by Mr. John Manza, Assistant Secretary General for Operations at NATO. We are just waiting for Mr. Manza to join the ShadeMed conference this morning, so please be patient.
Yes, Commander, from Markham, I think we should probably crack on, and maybe we could kick off the panel, and if Mr. John Manza is joining us, we will stop and listen to him. Do you agree with this? Or he doesn't.
Sir, yes, sir. That's a sensible suggestion. So we will now proceed with the panel for today. The panel's topic is NATO's approach to maritime security in the Mediterranean. It will be moderated by Paul Taylor, who works as a contributing editor at Politico. The panel will be followed by a questions and answer session before we have a break until 14:15. The only change to that would be if Mr. Manza is able to join us prior to the lunch break. After lunch, we will have the outcomes of the working groups where they will be presented. And as it was the case yesterday, we would ask that anyone with questions to submit them to the following email address: polad1@ euohq.defesa.it. I spell out POLAD is POLAD 1 at euohq.defesa.it. And please submit your questions before the end of the panel discussion. I will now hand the floor to the moderator of panel 4, Paul Taylor, please.
Thank you, Commander Cohen. Good morning, everybody. Many thanks to the organizers, both EU NAVFOR Med and Marcom, for giving me this opportunity to introduce this very interesting panel in which we heard yesterday a lot about the overall situation in the Mediterranean region and its problems, and today we'll look much more about what NATO can and is doing about it. So yesterday's sessions gave us a stark picture of the growing political and social instabilities in the Mediterranean basin, the difficulties of economic development despite opportunities, notably in the energy sector, and the grim situation, I think one can only say, of human rights in many of the South Mediterranean countries. This morning, our panel is going to look at how NATO contributes to maritime security in the Mediterranean, how this fits into NATO's wider mandate, which, as you heard, is defense and deterrence and crisis management, and of course partnerships, and how partnerships with the EU and with East Mediterranean, North African and Gulf states can help achieve those goals. It comes at a time when Russia continues to increase its military footprint in the region, and China has established both commercial bridgeheads and the beginnings of a military presence. Does NATO still have air and sea superiority, dominance throughout the Mediterranean? What are the main challenges there? How does NATO's Sea Guardian operation in the Med address the problems of terrorism, arms smuggling, and other threats below the threshold, let's say, of open conflict? How is climate change likely to affect the security environment and NATO's missions? What role can NATO play in combating the sources of irregular migration and the traffickers? So I'm Paul Taylor, and as Commander Cohen said, I'm a columnist for Politico, but I also wear another hat, which is Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe, a Brussels think tank. And with that hat on, I published a report for them on Italy and Mediterranean security in 2019. When I was researching the topic, I encountered quite a lot of resistance to NATO and the West more generally among North African officialdom, academics, and civil society. While certainly some people in Middle Eastern and North African governments welcome pragmatic NATO cooperation and assistance in training, capacity building, most of those are a long way from sharing all of our values on democracy, the rule of law, human rights, or gender equality. There's also a strong sense that in public opinion, NATO was a damaged brand in the Muslim world after the Western military actions in Afghanistan and Iraq, and above all, perhaps in Libya, where a NATO air campaign, as we know, helped oust Colonel Gaddafi, but left chaos that has resulted in a decade of intermittent civil war. As Charles Fries said yesterday, there was also a sense that unless a political settlement could be achieved in Libya, the country would become a permanent source of instability, fueled by outside powers who could exploit it to weaken both the EU and NATO. Well, to examine all of these subjects and others they may wish to raise, we have a great panel of speakers this morning. In order of speaking, I'd like to welcome Lieutenant General Pascal Delers, who is Deputy Commander of NATO's Allied Air Command, based in Ramstein, Germany. General Delers was a French Air Force pilot with more than 2,500 flying hours, including 115 combat missions in Chad, Iraq, and Kosovo. So a very experienced airman as well as a military commander. We have Commander Panagiotis Tripontikas, who is the climate security advisor of the Greek Navy. And I particularly want to thank him for kindly agreeing to stand in at short notice for Dr. Fotios Moustakis of Plymouth University. Plymouth University, incidentally, where in his idle hours, Commander Tripontikas is doing a postgraduate degree. I'm not sure how many of those idle hours he finds. From Lisbon, we're joined by Lieutenant Colonel Diana Moraes of the Portuguese Ministry of Defense. She is chair of the NATO Committee on Gender Perspectives. And finally, last but not least, we've already heard from him once, Vice Admiral Didier Piaton, who is Deputy Commander of MARCOM, Allied Mar Command in Northwood in the UK, and a French Navy helicopter pilot originally who flew missions in the Gulf, the Horn of Africa, and the Balkans, and then later served as a naval officer in the Gulf of Guinea, the Caribbean, the Middle East Gulf, and the Indian Ocean. So there's barely a stretch of water he hasn't sailed or flown over. Commander Kirwan has given you the address to which to send questions to all of our speakers. That address, I would encourage you to use it early, because there was, I think, a bit of a time lag yesterday between questions being asked and being passed on to the moderator, and they're being passed on to me by email. So let me start with General Delers and ask you, sir, how NATO seeks to achieve its objectives of deterrence and defense in the Mediterranean, and perhaps you can also talk about partnerships and capacity building.
Say hello, Paul. You hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for the organizers for giving me this opportunity to present the air implication in the Mediterranean Sea activity and operation. You have already depicted the context, and considering the potential for spreading or exploiting the risk and threat emanating from the south, talking about Russia, China's ambition, terrorism group, armed proliferation, hybrid strategy, and strategy shock. The southern flank really represent now a big challenge to the alliance. So NATO shall now seriously consider posturing itself properly to monitor, anticipate, and prevent any crisis arising from that area, but also to deter any competitors that could use the Med Sea and the south flank to destabilize the secure area. So AirCom is already engaged in the area, along with MARCOM as well, to demonstrate the alliance presence. So first of all, understand the situation and the environment will help us deterring competitors and anticipating crises. So understand is the key at the beginning. By developing a comprehensive situational awareness in the southern flank and prioritizing the activities of the hub south. So we need to maintain a strong presence in terms of ISR to monitor the situation in Med Sea, but also in Middle East and North Africa. So AirCom is developing an ESR matrix, gathering national ESR missions in the secure area of interest, among other Med Sea. This brings really the alliance based on national voluntary contribution, a more comprehensive situation awareness, and a more complete common operational feature, including maritime and land features. So we need also to maintain the military partnership with nations from the mainland to get a better insight of the local situation. ERCOM is well involved in this partnership, mainly take two examples with Tunisia and Jordan from an air perspective. We have regular meetings providing NATO representatives with a better understanding of the local environment. And we have this crucial role from GFC Naples up south to maintain strong relationship with nations from the southern flank to provide directive and guidance for intel collection. So the aim of the Up South initiative, led by Naples and directed by SHAPE, is to develop trust and confidence with those nations, between NATO and partner nations of the area, to get the picture and the best understanding of the situation. So the Naples has a prioritization on a regular basis to conduct the focus collection activities. Based on this, DNG, ERCOM engaged nation from RSR mission to support alliance needs. We need also to prevent by enhancing our cooperation with the EU, the European Union, taking benefits from greater political military synergy and concentrating our effort on immediate neighborhood. Even if it's not really a component responsibility, this needs to be improved via a more intensive dialogue between SHAPE, the components, and the allies. This will give all the parties additional knowledge on the environment. Also, to deter, we need to maintain a solid presence of forces, NATO or national, in the Mediterranean, ensuring a seamless transition between peace and crisis. This is already mentioned by Amiral Piaton, looking for better cooperation with EU to optimize NATO operational posture. This posture is fully in line with the deterrence and defense of Euro-Atlantic area concept. We have already what we call the ERCOM Marcom Playbook. It's kind of a vignettes recently developed aimed at providing some picture, objectives, scheme of maneuvers, force requirements, STRATCOM messaging to organize deterrence activity. ERCOM is really engaged to implement vignettes regularly in Med-C in order to demonstrate NATO presence and capability. And we need also to advocate and encourage all the sharing of national activities, of course, intel as well, which is more complicated. This will be a demonstration of force, so we need to rely on the national presence. So understand, prevent, deter compose the first pillar to ensure this proper NATO posture in the Mediterranean Sea. The second pillar relies on agility of our structure and synchronization of our action. Which is really important is the rapid evolution of the situation that may lead from a crisis to a conflict. This is required also from the alliance the ability to be reactive, responsive, and agile. That's why we built our new RC2 concept. And ERCOM has developed this concept to aim at providing at the component level commanders with multiple options to tailor the RC2 structure to the operation or the activity. Moreover, we have already built a core RC2 capability able to command and control a limited air activity in coordination with other components, provide the responsiveness and the reactivity required to handle unexpected events. Finally, the credibility of the alliance in the ISMED will depend on our ability to synchronize our actions to achieve the desired effect. To illustrate the statement, I would like to utilize the deterrence equalizer presented by the Admiral Blunt, the Marcom at the last Marcom Commanders Conference. It describes perfectly the DDA principles that need to be synchronized among NATO: capability, intel, and communication. So ERCOM and MARCOM Playbook and the vignettes perfectly feed these three domains to ensure all units engaged are well aware of the objective and the end state. So to conclude about your question, Paul, ERCOM is fully engaged to support NATO's security dimension as a secure aerial border, together with maritime and land component. The southern flank is of utmost importance to preserve peace and stability in NATO countries. As I like to highlight, the situation we are facing nowadays needs to be handled jointly, combining all our forces from sea, land, and air, cyber and space, SIOP, STRATCOM. The sole open question remaining today is how do we assess our impact to our competitors? I will end by that, Paul. Over to you.
Thank you very much, General. Come back and maybe ask a question or two about that in a second. But let me first ask next Commander Tripontikas to tell us how climate change is going to impact, or perhaps is already impacting, Mediterranean security, and what he sees as the implications for NATO's roles and missions. Commander Tripontikas.
Yes, good morning all. How can I upload, just give me 1 minute because I have a presentation. How can I share my screen? Can you help me?
Commander Cohen, can you help with that? Can you provide a little technical advice to?
It's just sharing my, I want to share my screen. Okay, just a moment.
Yes, there should be on your screen for
It's okay,
Microsoft Teams, there should be a symbol with an arrow pointing up.
Okay, now I am uploading the briefing. Okay. So in order to visualize what I'm going to send in the next 4 to 5 minutes. Okay, I think it's okay. So I represent my professor Fotios Moustakis from Plymouth University. So are you able to see the slides? Is it okay? Can you see the slides?
We can see them, yeah.
Okay, so in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to present the case of Mediterranean region and the implications of climate change for maritime security. Yesterday, I had the chance to say that climate change is a term that I found it in a document of the CIA, was published in 1974. It says there the stability of most nations is based upon a dependable source of food, but this stability will not be possible under the new climate era. So in a very briefing, I will show you what does it mean climate change for the Mediterranean region. We are talking about that this region is warming 100% faster than the global average. The regional temperature increase of 2.2 degrees Celsius by 2040, while Paris Agreement targets is 1.5. We are talking about that within 20 years, 250 million people will be classified as waterproof. Problems in health and security, the increased frequency, intensity, and duration of heat waves imply significant health risks. Also, the ecosystem, Mediterranean is the hotspot of climate and environmental change. We've seen the mega fires. We live with mega fires. So climate change influences the geopolitical landscape. Demands are expected to increase for maritime security missions. We are talking about a complex and urgent challenge that shapes our plans operations, training, infrastructure, acquisition, etc. First of all, we have impact on people. That is what we have to understand, okay? The climate change, sea level rise, extreme weather events, temperature increase, all have an impact on people, and the next impacts on human rights. We have spread of disease, displacement of population, disruption of educational services, damage to tourist sector. More specifically, impact on armed forces plans operations. Very briefly, we have sea level rise again, temperature increase. That means we have impact on overflight possibility. We have impact on intelligence, on surveillance and reconnaissance capability. We have an increased number of black flag, increase inundation, erosion, and flooding damage. All those elements change our operational parameters for current and, of course, weapons and equipment. So there is an increasing need to safeguarding freedom of navigation and monitoring events. More specifically, at tactical level, in order to understand what does it mean climate change for the practitioner, for us, the rising sea levels and erosion, we have possible change of coastal state baselines. That means we have a change of the current elimination of maritime zones, possible loss of maritime rights and valuable resources in maritime zones. So we maybe go to new disputes and conflicts in anti-submarine warfare. All these climate change implications, salinity, the increasing temperature of the upper waters change the transmission loss and detection levels, and that have weapons performance on acoustic sensor and torpedoes. In aviation, the rising sea levels and storm surges threaten coastal airports. We have shifting wind patterns that can modify optimal flight routes and fuel consumption. Warmer air, of course, imposes takeoff weight restriction, and everybody can understand what are the impacts of this. Also for underwater heritage. So the salinity, the temperature, and the acidification can change the chemical change sea, and the shipwrecks are deteriorating, and we may come to loss of cultural heritage and environmental disaster. So for academic, as an academic view, we have an holistic approach. We think that we have to shape our mindset on both cultural and natural heritage. Our basic perception is to see cultural and natural heritage viewed as indivisible. And our key points to end is those three that you can see in the slide. Educate and develop next generation adaptable leaders, enhance and promote military open science. And of course, there is a need not only for create a center of excellence on NATO, but to go a step forward and create a hub for the Mediterranean. But let me elaborate to this. Educating and develop next generation adaptable leaders that will help us to make the proper choices in climate change and decision making. Humans have invented education to help us quickly adapt and to mitigate in changing trends, while wildlife don't. So we need to train our people and create the proper doctrine is the key. Another factor, as I said before, is to enhance and promote military open science. That means we have to involve armed forces in scientific endeavor that will generate new knowledge and deeper understanding. Of course, a collaboration between scientists and armed forces who are concerned and motivated, they will make the difference. And last, we know that Canada's initiative make a proposal to host the Center of Excellence, but we strongly believe as an academic that the hub of the COE that is responsible for the Mediterranean region, the Middle East and the North Africa is a step forward, the initial step. Again, we need to have an holistic view for producing the best possible synergies based on the triangle, public, academia, and industry. And that concludes my 5 minutes brief.
Thank you. We'll come back to those and the very rich lessons that you've given us in that presentation. But if I may just ask one quick question.
Yes.
What's the difference between the hub for the South that's been existed since 2017, I think, in Naples at JFC Naples, and the hub for the Mediterranean, Middle East, and North Africa that you're suggesting?
No, it's we don't have any center of excellence right now dedicated to climate change and security. So Canada has made a proposal to create to host the center of excellence for NATO. But again, Mediterranean is it's an area that it's totally in a very bad shape, and I think that if the nations cooperate and create a hub for the Mediterranean only, then we can work better with the society and the science, just like the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, the IUCN. I think that we need to go a step forward because climate is changing and is not waiting for us to do things. You know, we have to be proactive.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. We'll come back to in a while, Commander. Let me turn to Colonel Moraes and ask her how NATO and its member nations should address the issue of women's rights and gender equality as it forges security partnerships with countries in the East and Southern Mediterranean and in the Middle East. Commander Moraes.
Good morning, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by addressing Marcom and UNAV4Med for co-hosting this panel and for bringing the topic of gender perspective to the table, stimulating the debate around women, peace, and security. Thank you for that, and thank you for the invitation that was sent to me on name of the NATO Committee on Gender Perspectives. So in 1999, when NATO adopted its strategic concept, it transformed itself from an instrument for collective defense to that of collective security, also embracing the idea of intervening outside the Euro-Atlantic area. 1 year after, the landmark United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 recognized that the terrain of war and peace is not gender neutral. The Women, Peace and Security agenda has provided us with the tools to transform security by bringing women into the processes and establishing a more inclusive vision of peace. And NATO has been implementing the Human Peace and Security agenda for a long time now, with the first policy on women, peace and security approved back in 2007. At the Lisbon Summit in 2010, a subsequent action plan to support the implementation of this policy was endorsed, and most recently both the policy and the action plan on women, peace and security have been updated and endorsed at the Brussels Summit in 2018. Actually, the action plan is currently under revision, and it will be submitted to NATO defense ministers for endorsement very soon. But the 2018 policy introduced the framework of the 3 I's, which are integration, inclusiveness, and integrity. Integration is making sure that gender equality is considered as an integral part of NATO policies, programs, and projects. Inclusiveness, promoting an increased representation of women across NATO and in national forces to enhance operational effectiveness and success. And last, integrity, but not least, addressing systematic inequalities to ensure a fair and equal treatment of women and men in the alliance. So the WPS policy and action plan have been pivotal in the alliance work to include gender perspectives into all NATO activities. However, to fulfill this goal, gender needs to be mainstreamed into all strategies and policies by considering that threats and challenges to security have different impacts on men and women. This is a reality we should not ignore, and NATO's strategic documents and policies cannot be gender blind. Gender perspective must be coherently integrated throughout the development process, so it does not become a mere declaration of principles which falls short in its implementation. The Alliance Maritime strategy should respond to a human security approach addressing, inter alia, actions against illicit acts against women and girls at sea, in addition to gender-balanced and trained navies that include gender experts, male or female, that will not only be able to better protect them from gender-based violence, but also to empower these women and girls. Furthermore, as NATO discusses its future next strategic concept, gender equality has a considerable role to play in this regard, not only because it matters for the way in which NATO as a collective security institution operates, but also for how it shapes itself as a democratic institution. The concept of security is not only tied to the military dimension of each individual nation, but is a transnational need that calls for several actors and a very different set of skills. NATO needs to address gender inequality and integrate gender perspectives through the Alliance 3 core tasks: collective defense, crisis management, and cooperative security, securing its borders, including the maritime ones. When I started my career in the military academy, a few years ago, I would say, one of the first things I was taught as a future commander was that we must lead by example. Well, NATO must also lead by example, and it must start from within. The Alliance should envision a strategic concept that pledges and leverages gender equality, moving from the commonly accepted add-on gender perspective and women, peace and security agenda to challenging the Alliance and its biases and assumptions on how security is made. From here, everything will follow. Paul, I'll hand over the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana. We'll come back, I think, to some of those issues in the next round. But let me finally then, for this round, go back to Admiral Piéton and ask him to give us the big picture, as it were, from where you sit, of how the security environment is evolving in the Mediterranean. To tell us a bit more about the growing Russian and Chinese presence and capabilities, the hybrid and cyber threats, the tensions perhaps over hydrocarbons, and those other threats that you address daily, terrorism, the consequences of political instability, and the migration challenges that throws up. Admiral, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your question. Your question, in fact, I would say you gave me more or less 4 minutes. Your question would probably require days of work, because it's a very comprehensive question, and it's very it would probably made. But as to go directly to your points, as for Russia, as we see all seen the major change since 2015 with the return of the Russian Federation Navy to the East Mediterranean, with a contingent presence supported by its bases in Tartus and also in Sevastopol, including the caliber-equipped diesel submarines. As you know, I entered the Navy, the French Navy, before the 90s, so it was still the Cold War this time, and the Russian presence, where we had to witness it. Of course, today's presence is probably not the size of the former previous escadra of the Soviet times, but it's still a concern, as you can imagine. It's adds to the Mediterranean dimensions of NATO deterrence presents an additional challenge, of course. Let me say that we are looking at the global area of responsibility. This allows us to see the Russian Federation Navy as a whole and its movements between the Northern Fleet, Baltic Fleet, and Black Sea Fleet, and the East Med deployment. So it gives us a good idea of what they are doing there. As for China's naval presence in the Mediterranean, it has been a regional debate, but we've seen some deployments in the previous years. Again, this is very much more important than the Russian Navy, because back to 30 years ago, you can't hardly see any Chinese military units out of the coastal waters of their country. So, but a greater concern now is to the alliance has been the Chinese state or corporate purchase of some ports of logistical infrastructures, and this has also an importance to NATO's readiness, to NATO's support in some ports or areas. So the scales of the Chinese presence is not for the moment a worry, but it's a challenge for the future here, probably. With regards to terrorism, as everyone knows, and I will not mention the name of the terrorist groups because I don't want to advertise them or give them any kind of legality, but they are still there around the area, and we still have to control them directly or indirectly through, for example, Operation Sea Guardian. Because it's one of the tasks of the Operation Sea Guardian to control the terrorist related activities, and but also if we give a look at what happened last summer in Afghanistan, we've seen a large number of weapons left behind. All those weapons could end up across the Mediterranean or around the world, and it's of course, and especially if the Taliban does not keep their commitments of not supporting terrorism. So it will be an additional challenge. For illegal activities, we've seen some oil bunkering in previous years. Of course, this is a subject of a United Nations Security Council resolution that authorizes interdiction of such traffic. NATO is not enforcing it as such, but part of OSG, Operation Sea Guardian mandate, we have to, as I said, to disrupt terrorist-linked activities, and this may be one of those. All those threats brought together represents a real risk. It's arms and oil smuggling, as I said before. It's human trafficking, certainly, and all can be linked to transnational criminal networks. So I mean by that the dimension of the disruption of this traffic is not only military, it is military, but it's only probably more than military. We have to connect other stakeholders. So this would be my point on your question. But just to conclude, I would say that if we want to be efficient in our objective, we must link with all the stakeholders, all the organizations, and as you know, Marcom and Shape are so promoting some kind of arrangements with irony. Again, this is up to the political level to decide. It's not for us. I'm speaking for the operational level, but among our two organizations, it's also all the good-willing stakeholders. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Admiral. Not, of course, your fault. We had a little difficulty in hearing your remarks once or twice. I think the connection with Marcom HQ is not great, but I think we all managed to get the thrust of your message. One possible way of improving the audio might be to switch off the video. So I don't know whether you might like to try that in the Q&A. It will very soon be the opportunity for all of you who are connected today to ask your questions to the panelists. So while I'm asking a second round of questions, I would recommend that you get your emails in now to polad1 at euohq.difesa.it, Italia. And let me go back to General Delers. There's a question that I mentioned in my introduction. You're working with partners. NATO is working with Mediterranean and Middle Eastern partners who, are very different from us in terms of their governance, in terms of their approach to human rights, and so on. How do you deal with that when you're dealing with these countries? How do you how does it affect your work with them?
Thank you for the question, folks. Very challenging question. We are really focused on the military side of the I would say exchange. We are not talking a lot just because I left this part to shape level or even the other organization, but at the component level, we are really focused on the military side of the exchange. It means accurately that we are focused on the preparation of the forces, all the share information that we are able to provide. Just because, as I tried to explain in my first answer, is that it relies really on the capability that we have to know and to understand what's going on in the area. So, and this is the way we get this approach. It means that with those nations, and we know already, and I just give two examples. We've had a very good relationship, but we are not talking about political side. That's right. And just to mention the intervention of Diana, we are not talking about gender. Just to talk about that. Unfortunately, of course, but this is really something that we are really focusing on the preparation of the forces, the training, what they can bring to us, to the knowledge of the situation, and to understand also their stance and their position in the area. Just because it will help us a lot to get some or to adjust the activity that we need. Of course, we will not have all the assets that we need just to make this understanding of the situation. But just to answer directly to your question, this is focused on the military side. Over to you, Paul.
Just another question that arose when I was writing my report on the Mediterranean. There have been proposals that NATO should put together some sort of training command for partnerships because of the feeling that we don't necessarily have. It's hard to get trainers. It's hard to get nations to offer good trainers. Being a trainer in a security cooperation program is not necessarily seen as career enhancing, and therefore you don't necessarily get the best elements. And somebody gave me an example looking at in fact, this was the EU training mission in the Sahel, and comparing it with Opération Barkhane, the French military intervention, and saying that, you know, Barkhane is something that soldiers and airmen want to be part of because it's the cutting edge of what they're doing, and it's career enhancing and so on. Whereas the EU training mission doesn't have the same attraction, and therefore we're not getting good people. So what would you do about that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. If we need really a training structure, commanding training structure, this is a discussion we have already inside the Nato arena. But we don't really think that this is the right way, just because if you are focusing only on training, it means that we'll probably miss some key exchange with the other nations. So we need really a mix. And your example on EU, it's a good one in the Sahel. Just because if we are only focusing on training, it means that the nation, or depending on the nation, of course, they will probably miss all this operational part that they are interested in, and all the intel sharing that we need to add, or we try to add. So I think it's a combination of all. So to have only a dedicated training commanding entities, I don't think that it will meet the requirement. I think we need to see it as a whole, and to have this. Of course, the problem is we need entities that are the big view and that are able to handle all this part, training, sharing, intel, and I think this is main. That's why the role of Naples in the south, I think it's a good way to handle it, or to have a big picture of what we need to do. Of course, with SHAPE, just because SHAPE needs to engage the nation as well. But this is my answer to your question.
I see Admiral Piéton raising his hand. Perhaps you'd like to come in, sir.
Yeah. So on the question of trainers or fighters, I would just offer a quick maritime view in the Mediterranean. If we want to train our partners, we need not to send them specialists of the. We must also bring people who have been or will be deployed in that area. And I think that the success of the training is to have a movement between for our trainers between a training position and a fighting position. And so I think we must also admit our manpower is limited, but I think and just especially for what we see in the Mediterranean challenges, a need to have trainers who perfectly know the part of war fighting at sea, and very much aware of what's going on at sea, also to give good advice and to understand how valuable it could be to work with the people you have to train. Over.
Thank you. We still have that. It still raises the question: if we don't do it with a specific training command or separate, how do we improve the supply and quality of trainers? I think that issue is out there. If this isn't the right answer, then what is? Admiral.
Again, please allow me to say, here in Marcom, we are in the NATO Maritime Command. we are doing both. We are deploying forces, we are commanding and controlling them, and we are also training the NATO forces in high-end exercise. And this is what nations like in our activities. It's high-end training. Of course, basic training would be in the Mediterranean, done by the nations, but this is what the alliance can offer to the nations, because I don't know how experts are people within this forum, so I would like to mention this.
Yeah, thank you. While you're on, if I can take this sort of out of the rotating order and ask you, I have a question a little bit about the East Mediterranean. You talked about it, but you know, we hear a lot from the military about anti-access area denial, A2AD. Obviously, we hear about it in relation to Crimea and the Black Sea, but also to Tartus and the Russian presence in Syria. How much more difficult is it becoming for NATO to operate in the East Med, and do you see any signs of A2AD bubbles potentially developing along the North Africa shores, either in Libya or in Algeria? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. In such unclassified environments, I could say that of course, we are paying a lot of attention to the development of A2ADs in our competitors. But in peacetime, I would say our main effort will be to preserve the freedom of navigation of not only our the shipping industry, but also the allied navies, and it's done, and I think we do well, and we send the good messages. At the same time, as I mentioned previously, we also see some GPS or AIS spoofing or jamming, which is a problem in terms of literally access to the denial. It's obviously illegitimate, and we are also taking actions to counter this and to name these kind of actions. In wartime, more difficult to talk more in such a forum, but I think we have the necessary knowledge to know how to manage and to our deterrence are entirely credible, and believe me. So this is my message.
Thank you very much. I recognize that it's a question that's hard to answer entirely in an unclassified setting. Commander Triplantikas, I was intrigued by what you said about the rising waters and the issues that's going to raise. One obvious thing is perhaps about the Suez Canal, which is such a choke point, as we saw earlier this year, where a apparently simple accident bottled up world shipping for a long time. And how do you see the climate change having an impact on those particular bottlenecks, the Suez Canal, perhaps the Gibraltar Strait, the Narrows? You're on mute, sir.
It's okay now? Okay. So I think that thank you very much for the question. Climate change and extreme events, we know that influence migration behavior and patterns. I believe that the next 10 years or 20, we will see an increased tension of migration because climate change is act as a threat multiplier, especially in Middle East and North Africa region. So it's a very difficult situation. Of course, we will see a lot of tension over there. So, because first of all, we will see the impacts of climate and environmental change that imply directly to human security, and I'm sure that we will see an escalate on conflict and insecurity, but I'm not able to give any further, let's say, information about Suez Canal or Gibraltar. But for sure, maritime issues, maritime security will have to make an alarm. The safeguarding of freedom of navigation is something that we have to take in account the next couple of years, the next 10 years.
Thank you. I'm just looking with one eye to my email so far, awaiting questions from the floor. I will keep on in the meantime asking mine. So if you want to stop me, best way is to answer a question of your own. And also with just one eye on the organizers as to whether we've been able to locate John Manser at NATO and whether he's going to be able to come on after our session, or whether we keep going. If somebody could give me a signal in one way or another. Meanwhile, Diana Moraes, if I can come back to you, you talked about the importance of mainstreaming gender equality into everything that NATO does. And looking particularly at the Mediterranean region that we're addressing today. Where's the top priority? What's the biggest thing that needs fixing in your view in the Mediterranean area? And also, when NATO's dealing with partners that don't have the same view of gender equality as we do, and as we're trying to make a reality inside our own forces and alliance, how do we, what would you recommend in terms of an approach to that? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Paul. So that's a difficult question indeed. But as I've mentioned in my first intervention, I think it's really important that NATO leads by example, because General Delers was talking about the preparation and training of the forces, and when we are preparing our forces, we need to understand that our forces must reflect the societies we seek to protect. And the societies are 50%, more or less 50% women, 50% of men. And I'm not saying that the NATO forces must be 50% women, 50% men. They must be suited to accomplish the mission. But if we are talking about maritime operations, where we have to deal with migrants, we have human trafficking, I think our vessels need to be staffed, need to be trained, need to be equipped to rescue and assist all the kind of different people they get, which are women, men, boys and girls of different ages with different health and psychological needs. And our military need to be trained to do that. Our vessels need to be equipped to do that. And from my perspective, it is really, and I'll go to the navies, to the vessels again, and our navies, because for those countries, they are NATO's first representation. It's their first contact. So it's really important that they see that NATO itself integrates gender perspective, that they have a balanced military, because if they don't, and if they don't share the same values as us, they will, how can we preach for something if we don't give the example. For me, this is really important. We cannot impose values. I think we learned that maybe in a hard way, but we cannot impose them. So we can train, and even when we are talking about capacity building, training our partners, or we can try to educate them, set the example, and with time, maybe and try to make them understand the importance of having also gender-balanced armed forces, because at the end, women and men of a country have the same right to serve that country and to provide security. And if we put things in this way, every person has a right to defend its country, not only men. So I think we have to have a comprehensive approach on this. It's not an easy task, but like I've mentioned, we really need to start from within. This, to me, is really mandatory. Paul.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple of raised hands from the naval fraternity, so I think we'll turn that straight back to them, to Admiral Piaton first, and whether it was that he wanted to respond to, but certainly I would ask him to respond to the question about making sure that that navies are staffed so that they're able to be first responders to women and children, as well as men who are rescued at sea and so on. But just on a technical point, I should let you know that unfortunately John Manza, the Assistant Secretary General of Nato, is not going to be able to join us this morning. That gives us a little bit more time for our discussion, but we'll try and perhaps wrap up in the latest at 10 to 1 so that everybody gets their lunch break. Admiral.
Yes, thank you, Paul. First, my point was the one concerning the absence of Mr. John Manza, but you get the information also. And on the point of gender, I think we view from an operational headquarter, it's, and I will give you a personal view, it's about operational efficiency, but also the values we are defending, because we fight for values, so we don't fight for, and we allow that our values to have 30 nations fighting together. So for this, we have to share this value. So first, on the operational efficiency. Now, most of the navies crews and the companies are manned with men and women. This is not only an added value to their efficiency, but it allows us also to lead some operations in a better way. I mean, for example, what we call NEO, non-combatant evacuation operations, where we have to engage people, population, often in very bad health and moral conditions, with also children, women, and so on. So we are able now, better than we used to do, to lead such operations. When we send boarding teams also on civilian ships, we are able to, we have the responsibility of the crews when we stop a ship. The commanding officer has the responsibility of the crew. He's more or less stopping just to launch an investigation, a search, and of course also in the SAR operations, search and rescue operations. The people we have to deal with them in a proper manner. So this is a purely operational view. And on the other hand, let me say that we are again 30 nations alliance, and we have to allow everybody to work in a safe environment, safe for his health and mental health. So everybody should be able, men, women, should be able to work and to feel comfortable in our headquarters. This is the values, on a practical way, this is the values we are defining and which contributes to our reputation. Over.
Thank you. Before I go back to Diana, perhaps, Panos, your hand's been up and down. Do you want to come in on that?
Yes, I want to comment on Diana. I totally agree with Diana, but we have to think that training, it's not only education on how we are going to work on board our vessels. It's something bigger and it's something deeper. We need to change behavior. We need to, let's say, to educate and develop as I said before in my presentation, the next generation leadership, because those leaders are going to make are going to take the difficult decisions. So if we manage to adapt and to adapt the new leadership, then the decisions are going to help us to move forward, because we are influencers, okay? We influence the people around us, not only in our organization or in NATO, but also in our families. We have to think that our way of life, our way of thinking is the way that can help us move forward in a better environment. So we need to have an holistic approach. What does it mean training or education? And we need to work on that, I think, very hard, because at the end, you know, everything costs. New vessels cost, new equipment costs a lot, but changing and adapt the new leadership doesn't cost, but it has to be done. Over.
Thanks. I'd like to just offer Diana an opportunity to respond to those two comments from the Admiral and from Commander Tripontikas.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to Admiral Piaton and Commander Tripontikas for your remarks. So I know that regarding Admiral Piaton, I know NATO is already, and for sure Marcom is already doing an effort to train people, men and women, on how to integrate gender perspectives, and even in the planning and execution of operations. I hope HERCOM the same. And I fully agree with what Commander Tripontikas said. Training, education and training, to me personally, is key for any organization. And I'm not saying that gender, sometimes people working on gender, other people think we only think about gender and we are really keen about gender, but we have to give training in cyber, in climate change, in hybrid warfare, and gender perspectives are a lot of things. As I've mentioned, we need to have NATO needs to have a really wide range of different skills to be able to respond to the different security challenges. But what is important from all the security challenges that NATO and the nations face is that everything has a gender dimension. For instance, Commander Tripontikas talked about climate change and talked about impact on people. The thing is that we cannot address people as some group, because within people you have different kinds of people that have, and climate change will have different impact on those different people. General Delers mentioned that we need to understand the environment. So understand was the first step. And to understand the environment, we need to include gender dimension, because, for instance, if we are talking about terrorism, which Admiral Piaton spoke about, we tend to think about terrorism and think about the agents of terrorism as only being male. But we cannot forget, and there are several terrorist groups that are using women in a really active roles, like for instance, suicide bombers, because we have the stereotype that women are not a threat. They will never be a suicide bomber. But if they don't have an active role, they have really not background roles like recruitment, because they can recruit better than men, because they can engage with men, with women. They are mothers. They connect with other men, mothers, members of the families that can influence those young boys to be recruited or not. So they have a key role. They support such structures. They take care of the logistics, the financing. So we have to acknowledge, I think, in my humble opinion, that that's why I talk about gender mainstreaming. Everything, whenever we are talking about even its emergence, disruptive technologies, or climate change, or terrorism, or if we want to really have a understanding of the situational environment, we have to integrate gender perspective, because we have to understand the different roles men and women have. And if we are talking about maritime insecurity, we have to understand that insecurity originates in land. You all know that. And in land, women and men have different roles. And unless we acknowledge this and we understand this, our actions will not be 100% effective. And I hand over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all our speakers. It's been a very lively, rich discussion. We didn't get a lot of questions from the floor, but maybe that's because I asked all the awkward ones myself. That's what they pay me to do. If I had to sum up, it's difficult to pull it all together, but let's say that we're all looking, we're all watching the same movie. We're seeing a situation where fragmentation, where political instability, and where the emergence of new players is making the Mediterranean a more complex and a more contested security environment than it has been, let us say, since the end of the Cold War. And that climate change is going to multiply make all of that more difficult. And that's the challenge. It's a challenge for NATO, but it's not a challenge that NATO can handle on its own. It's a challenge where NATO partnership with the European Union in particular, when it comes to issues of economic development, climate mitigation, migration, youth and education, and so on, the European Union has more in its toolbox perhaps than NATO does. And so that interaction is going to be crucial. And I would just add that whereas I said in my introduction, I had encountered the sense that NATO was a damaged brand in the Middle East and the North Africa because of its operations of the last 20 years, I would say that there's a risk also that the EU can become a damaged brand, or is a damaged brand in that area, because of the perceptions of Fortress Europe, because of the perceptions of the EU as being at times protectionist and at times close to young people and their aspirations, or too much perhaps in cahoots with strongmen. So I just leave that thought in the room, that we must make, if we want to be effective, both the EU and NATO in this area, we must make sure that that our brands are appealing to the people who are going to be inevitably our partners today and in the future. Thank you. I pass it back to Commander Kerwin. Thank you to all of our speakers, and thanks to the audience.
Thank you, Paul Taylor, and thank you to all the panelists for what has been a very interesting discussion. Thank you also to those that asked questions and certainly added to the whole debate. Unfortunately, as Paul has said, unfortunately, Mr. John Manza, Assistant Secretary General for Operations at NATO, is unable to join our ShadeMed conference today. So the intention now is to break for lunch, and we will resume at 14:15 hours, when we will hear the outcomes of the working groups, as well as the closing remarks of Rear Admiral Stefano Turchetto, Operational Commander of EU NAVFOR Med Irini. Thank you.